Everyone, maybe we can start. Nasif is still busy eating, but we will start. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, to our panelists and to the attendees to this webinar this afternoon. This is organized by the UP Center for Integrative and Development Studies in partnership with the Philippine International Studies Organization and the International Studies Department of Miriam College. This is part of a series of events that we've organized in line with our international conference, Decolonizing Global Studies, Charting Trends, Mapping Trajectories, scheduled for tomorrow and on Saturday. So this morning we had an academic workshop with some paper presenters also in that conference. And we wanted this session as a follow-up to that workshop for us to discuss about publishing. So just a few reminders to our attendees. The session is being recorded. Please be mindful. Kindly turn off your microphones and keep them on mute while our panelists are speaking. All questions must be coursed through the Q&A function of the Zoom webinar. We ask our panelists if maybe they could also go through the questions. If some questions are addressed particularly to you, maybe you can respond through the chat box as well. We ask the members of the attendees to be discreet in posting chats in the chat box. So this session is going to be uploaded later on in the YouTube channel of the Decolonial Studies program. So to start off the program, allow me to welcome the co-convener of the Decolonial Studies program and the president of the Philippine International Studies Organization, Francis Antoinette Cruz. Frankie?
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all of you. I know that some of us come from different time zones. Heartfelt welcome to you all, and thank you for coming to the Decolonizing Global Studies special session with academic publishers and journal editors organized by UPSID's Decolonial Studies program, Philippine International Studies Organization, and Miriam College. As Aaron has said, this is part of a 3-day conference and workshop held from today until Saturday, the 12th of September. So if you're interested in that. We have divided this afternoon session into 2 parts, and this will be very interesting for early career scholars, graduate students, and even undergraduate students who may want to, at some point, write an academic book or get into the academe. The first will focus on academic presses, and we're very honored to have Vishal Daryanomel, commissioning editor of Palgrave Macmillan and Springer Nature, Singapore. Roosfa Hashim, director of the International Islamic University Malaysia Press, Barry Clarke, managing director of Taylor & Francis Asia Pacific, and Simon Bates, editor at Routledge, and Nasifa Diong, book series editor for Palgrave Macmillan, Routledge, Clarke Press, and DLSU Publishing House. They will discuss the general book publishing process and provide us some insights and challenges faced in the light of this pandemic. In our second session, we will have representatives from academic journals to talk a bit about their scope and the journal publishing and editing process. And we'd like to welcome Patrick Campos of Humanities Diliman, Grace Barreto Tesoro of Social Science Diliman, Vicente Serrano of Critica Cultura, and Nasifa Diong once again for the International Journal of Islam and Asia. After each session, there will be adequate time for a Q&A. Please type your questions into the Q&A box for the open forum. And I do hope that you will take something away from this and be encouraged to publish at any one of the journals or publishing houses represented at this special session. Once again, thank you all for your presence today, and I look forward to a fruitful discussion.
The next speaker we have is Roosfa Hashim. He's the director of the International Islamic University Malaysia Press. So, Roosfa, you have 10 to 15 minutes.
20 minutes, okay.
Yeah.
So I can start now?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Hi, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Nasif for inviting me to share my experience with II Impress, especially during the pandemic, COVID-19. Dr. Nasif, your invitation is an honor to me and also to II Impress. And also thank you to the organizer for including me in this session. I hope by sharing my experience and information today will benefit all of you in this session. Actually, Vishal from Palgrave have touched a lot on what I also want to touch, what I want to talk, simply because Palgrave and I Impress are publishing about the same genre, same type of books. We're publishing scholarly books. So some of topics that we shall touch, especially on the publishing process, the submission process, peer review process, do's and don'ts, the length of publishing time for each manuscript to be published. All are parts of the topic that I plan to talk, but because actually we are almost practically the same, like what Palgrave do. So before I go further, I would like to talk a little bit about myself. I actually joined National University Malaysia Press, UKM Press, in 1991 as an editor for social sciences and humanities. So that I joined IUM Press in 2013, about 8 years ago, as the director of the press. And at IUM, I also teaching at the Department of Library and Information Science at this university. Now, let me start with a short information about IIUM Press. IIUM Press is the branch of scholarly publishing for this university, the International Islamic University of Malaysia. This press, the publisher, was established shortly after the establishment of the university. IIUM, established in 1983. So based on my search, I noticed that among the earliest imprint was around the late 80s. So as a university press, we are also a member of Malaysian Scholarly Publishing Council. We call it MAPIM, the abbreviation is MAPIM. And IIUM Press is also a member of Malaysian Book Publishers Association. IIUM Press is a medium-sized publisher compared to other university press in Malaysia. And we, as a scholarly publisher, as a university press, we publish scientific journals, monograph, research-based books, and textbooks, and other various teaching, learning-related materials, including the teaching modules. And we also publish general titles. We, as an Islamic University Press, we publish our books in English, in Arabic, and Malay language. But most of our books are in English, actually. We publish books by authors inside the university, the lecturers, and we also publish manuscript that we receive from outside the university. We also co-publish our books together with other publishers, especially from the Middle East, namely Islamic Development Bank in Jeddah, IDB in Jeddah, and publishers in Cairo and Beirut. Especially in Cairo and Beirut, we are more focused in books that are in Arabic. But with Islamic Development Bank in Jeddah, IDB, we publish mostly books on economics, Islamic economics, and all our books that we co-publish with IDB are in English. Our area of specialization actually in Islamic economics, Islamic finance, Islamic wakaf, Islamic banking, markas syariah, Islamic microfinance, zakat, halal entrepreneurship, and many other topics related to Islamic economics. We are also quite strong in Islamic law, especially Islamic family law, Islamic jurisprudence, and many other sub-topic under Islamic law. We are also now moving towards publishing more titles in Sustainable Development Goals, SDG. And I'm inviting all of you who are interested to send your manuscript. Please visit our website, our social media platform, Facebook, so that you could go through our catalog, online catalog, to see whether you could send your manuscript to us. IIUM Press, just like Palgrave just now, we practice peer review process for each manuscript that we publish, that going to publish with us. For your information, at the moment, to date, we have published over 3,000 titles of books and scholarly journals. Now let me share with you some of our experience during the pandemic COVID-19, the effect on IIUM Press lately. On March 18 this year, Malaysian government have introduced the movement control order, which make everyone trapped in the house. All schools and universities have been closed since 18 March this year. With most universities in Malaysia are closed until October this year, teaching is only allowed online. So since March this year, the online platform has become the new norm to the student and lecturers in this country. So the campus became empty, and only after mid-June, the university administrators and officers are allowed to start working, but with a very strict SOPs. Some of us in IIM Press start working in June, and some of us still working at home because of many reasons. And the university lecturers still continue working from home as they are teaching online. Since the university workshop are closed, we cannot sell our books through our on-campus bookstore, because there are no students on campus who will buy the textbook that we have published for them. Our bookstore is one of our most important selling channel. Higher sales were recorded at the beginning of each semester when the session started. So for this year, we cannot sell our book to our bookstore. So this is one of the most challenging time for us. During the MCO, the movement control order, all bookstores, not only in the campus, but throughout the country, were also closed. Our book sales stopped for a few months. However, we continue to receive orders for our published books with slightly increased number. And in the campus, university libraries were also closed. Students either read and refer to electronic material to complete their assignment, or they have to buy electronic books, or they have to buy books through e-commerce platform. We offer them this facility. And the closure of the library also affected our writers, because our writers cannot make reference. They cannot go to the library or to borrow books for the purpose of writing of their new books. And at the same time, the post office also closed. So despite book through an online platform, despite receiving many orders in the online platform, we are unable to ship books to customers. Posting of books during the pandemic became a bit slow during the last few months, between March and in fact until today. And the pandemic COVID-19 also affected our manuscript acquisition badly. All seminars and academic conferences for the year 2020 have been cancelled in the campus, and also abroad. Our lecturers cannot go to present their papers. They cannot go to other universities in the country or abroad. So this is the most serious blow to us as a university press, because we do not accept good papers for journals since March. No good chapters for books, no proceedings transformed into edited book. Number of manuscripts we received did not show a sharp increase, but even though the lecturers work from home, we assume that during the COVID, all lecturers and scholars stay at home and they concentrate writing, but they cannot go out, they cannot conduct research, they cannot present their papers. So this affected them and affected our manuscript acquisition very badly. But for those manuscripts that we already in our pipeline, our editors and writers have to work from home, working on soft copy manuscript. This is not something new, and they have to communicate between them through online and email and WhatsApp and other social media platform. So meaning that not only on working on the manuscript, but sometimes we need to call for meeting by using Zoom and WebEx and other meeting platform. The pandemic, COVID-19 also affected us in our promotion activities. We have to use all social media platform, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and our website. We also had to produce more posters online to promote the newly released title. So we have to stop book talk, we have to stop book launching, we have to stop seminars on books. Then this affected us very badly, because normally by organizing book talk, organizing book launching, we could get more sales. And we also affected in book fairs. Our participation in international book fairs also cancelled. Many book fairs have been cancelled as a result of COVID-19. Are you impressed to cancel our participation in the London Book Fair 2020? We also could not go to other planned book fairs such as Frankfurt and Jakarta and more international book fairs. Even in Kuala Lumpur, the Kuala Lumpur International Book Fair, which was very important to us, was also cancelled. This cancellation has the worst impact on our total book sales revenue for this year. At the Kuala Lumpur International Book Fair, we normally meet the authors, our book buyers, book distributors, and book sellers, and librarians who ordered books during the KL International Book Fair. But since the book fair is cancelled, this have affected us very badly. But we are planning to attend another book fair which will be started at the end of October. The book fair will be the book council. The place, the venue is at the Kuala Lumpur International Airport, Terminal 2. So we are going to take part in this book fair organized by Nation Book Council. I hope this book fair will help us in bringing more sales and income to cover what we have lost for the last few months. And we are also monitoring the readers' behavior in reading. We notice and we understand most of the readers now change from reading physical book, printed book, to e-book. So I am impressed also increasing number of book published from printed to e-books. And beside that, our training and workshop also affected by COVID-19. IUM Press often organize trainings, courses, workshop for our writers and editors. This is part of our initiative to get more manuscript, more quality manuscript. We guide them on how to write manuscript, to prepare manuscript, and to edit manuscript. But this year we cannot do much because of COVID and because of MCO. With the MCO, movement control order by the government, none of the activities can be organized. However, we have changed. We try to change from face-to-face workshop into online. But I'm sure most of you understand, online courses and workshop are not as good as face-to-face. We also cannot deny that nowadays we are more depend on Zoom and Webex for meeting, for workshop, and for seminars on books. Kuala Lumpur is now declared as the World Book Capital 2020. We have a special project in conjunction with the status of KL World Book Capital 2020. However, the launching of the KL World Book Capital, which was scheduled on April 22nd, has turned into an online event only. So IUM Press has planned many programs to participate in KL World Book Capital throughout the year until April 2021. But because of the COVID-19 pandemic, many of our program were affected. We continue the project launch program face-to-face and broadcast it live recently on 27 August recently. We launched physically, but we cannot invite many audience because of we have to keep the SOP. We have to ensure that all the audience who are attending, they keep their distance, physical distance, and we also hold a series of online talk shows. However, the impact of this program is not as expected, not as good as if we conduct it in face-to-face. One of our major project in conjunction with KL Book Capital is the translation book project. Because IUM, International Islamic University, we have more than 100 countries. Students came from more than 100 countries. So the main objective of the KL World Book Capital is to promote readings among the people. So we plan to translate at least one title from each country into either English, into Malay, or into Arabic, or the other way. We have allocated a considerable amount of money for this project. We plan to organize a translation workshop and to purchase copyright for translation book. However, translation workshop could not be conducted during COVID-19. The process of purchasing copyright is also relatively slow because of COVID-19. And at the moment, we have about 45 titles in our translation title in our project. We are trying to achieve 100 titles before April 2021, meaning we have about 6 to 7 months to finish this project. Hopefully, we can achieve our target.
All right, but, Professor Hashim, I'm sorry. You have a minute to wrap up. Sorry.
Okay. So as I mentioned just now, our procedures in publishing, submission, peer review is just like what Vishal have presented just now, so that I have focused more on COVID-19 effect on IIM Press. So if you have any question on publishing, you just follow whatever Palgrave practice. So that's all I think. Thank you very much.
All right. Professor Hashim, there is a question raised at the Q&A. If you would like to answer it by typing a response, you're free to do so, and maybe we can go back to it during the Q&A portion after Barry, Simon, and Nasif have finished their presentation. All right. So now let's proceed with Barry's presentation. Barry is the Managing Director of the Taylor & Francis Asia Pacific. Barry?
Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for this chance to address the audience. I won't introduce myself other than I'm the Managing Director for Taylor & Francis Asia Pacific. I've lived in Singapore for nigh on 30 years. So I'm just looking to set up my presentation. So let me see if I've got that right.
All right.
Is that good?
Yep, it's sharing now.
Sorry, let me just go to the beginning. Okay. Good. Okay, well, again, thank you very much for the opportunity. Ashil has already gone over a lot of the details of how to get published, and I was delighted to hear from Roosfa about the problems that we're all facing in COVID-19 worlds. It really has been very challenging. I would like to actually go back and go back to the beginning, if you like, of the process and try and look at it from the audience's point of view and think about what it is that academic publishing does and how we can help. So let me just flip the slides. Okay, it's not moving on, forgive me. There we go. Okay, so who are we and what is our role?
Barry, you ended the screen sharing.
I'm sorry. Let me try again. Okay, let me try again. I do apologize. Sure. Okay, are you back on that?
All right. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Okay. So what do publishers do? We filter, we frame, we amplify, and we service you. Basically, we filter the research, we frame it, and we amplify it, all to support academia. What do I mean by filter? So that means that we curate the best. We do have a peer review process, and we can talk about that in the question and answer session. The idea of peer review goes back to 1665 and the Oldenburg Principles. And the idea is that your research needs to be registered, it needs to be evaluated and certified. Your research then needs to be disseminated, and it needs to be archived for generations in the future. And that process does require peer review. The next thing we do is to frame your research. That's format. Your research may be a journal article. For this session, we're talking about book publishing. The technology has advanced tremendously in the last 20 or 30 years with the internet, and very significantly in book publishing, because people still like the physical book more than the physical journal, but we can now print books literally one at a time. And here we have a picture of our printing press, or rather the Macmillan printing press in Singapore. You can see books literally coming off their production line, one book at a time. Covers printed specifically for the needs of a particular customer. So that technology improvement is phenomenally important for us in recent years. Helps us frame your research. So the slides are not moving on, there we go. And next we have dissemination, which is all part of the amplification of your research. So when you choose a publisher to work with, make sure that they've really got the very best dissemination capabilities, marketing, distribution, sales globally. Wherever there are academics, you need to make sure that your chosen publisher has good support on the ground. And as I say, we provide you a service. Not only should that be meaning that your research becomes discoverable once it's been published, visibility is particularly important. Vishal did talk a little bit about how to improve your search engine optimization, how to improve your discoverability and your visibility. But also good publishers will ensure that there's really good engagement with academics and with audiences beyond academia, professionals and students. So after sales support is a very important part of your choice of publisher. Taylor and Francis, and I won't go into a lot of detail about Taylor and Francis, we have been publishing since 1798, so we're over 222 years old, founded in London. Today, we publish 7,000 new books per year. Every single one is peer-reviewed. And we have a backlist of over 140,000 titles. We are the leading publisher in the humanities and social sciences under the brand of Routledge, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And science, technology, and engineering and medicine publishing is under CERC Press. As some of you probably know, we have a very big journals publishing division, 2,700 journals, 600 of which are published with societies and associations around the world, including many in this part of the world, in Southeast Asia, China, Australia, etc. And we are the top publisher in 26 subjects. Again, the largest publisher in social sciences and humanities. We use Routledge for social science and humanities publishing. And this is not the right forum to talk at length about open access publishing, but we do have a couple of open access imprints, Cogent and Dove Press. As I say, I won't go into details about open access, but the idea is to make sure that your research is freely and permanently available online. It means that the funding model has to be different, but the idea of open science is that the research, the data, and other related material is disseminated, available, not only to academia, but also to an inquiring society. If you have access to a smartphone and a search engine, you should be able to find this critically important research. And most recently, we've upgraded, if you like, and supercharged our open access, open research publishing offering by joining with F1000R, which is primarily an article publishing platform. And we are working with the Wellcome Trust, that's a large funder of medical research, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and from next year, we'll be working with the European Commission to ensure that all mandates around open access are met through this publishing program. So that's a very important part of the future of academic research, open access. I thought I'd put up a few of our authors. Forgive me for the choice of some of the names, but I'm very delighted that we have some great thinkers of the past: Bertrand Russell, Charles Darwin, Alfred Russel Wallace. I'm delighted that we have people like Angela Merkel, who wrote an article for us a few years ago. But personally, having lived in the region for, as I say, 30 years, I'm very proud of our heritage in supporting researchers in this part of the world. Syed Hussein Alatas and his son, Syed Farhad Alatas, who of course is giving the keynote tomorrow, are both our authors, and very happy to have launched the book just recently by Nassif and Frankie. So you are joining that pantheon of famous authors from around the world. And that's something we're very proud of and encouraging in this part of the world in particular. Here's a couple of websites which I'd encourage you to go to if you want more information about how to get published. The top website is for books, and if you've got a journal article that you're thinking of preparing, we of course are a major journal publisher. Tips and the benefits of publishing with us are all listed there. So that's all from me, and I'd like to now stop sharing and then pass over to Simon Bates, who's my editor. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Barry. So let's proceed now to Simon, who, as Barry mentioned, is his editor at Routledge. Simon?
That's right. Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me okay. This is always a slightly surreal experience, even after 6 months or so of working like this. I have just got a few slides that I will try and share, and let's see if that works. Yeah, I don't think that's working. At least I can't see it. Can you see them?
I did,
So,
yes.
Can you now?
Yes.
Okay, so it should say publishing your book with Routledge.
Yes.
Okay, that's a good start. I will do that. Okay, yeah, I can see it now. That's better. So I am Routledge's editor for politics, sociology, history, and geography. I'm based in Singapore, and I work with authors who are all across Southeast Asia and Northeast Asia as well. I'm also working with Nassef on the series International Relations in Southeast Asia, which we now have a couple of books launched on. I don't have very much time, but I did want to talk a little bit about the sort of practicalities of proposing and writing a book. Hopefully you're now seeing my second slide.
Yes.
Which says, what should I put in my proposal? And Vishal's already talked about a lot of this stuff, so I won't dwell on it for too long. But I think for us, the key elements, we're less worried about standard forms. If someone wants a standard form to write a proposal for us, I have one for them. But these are the things you really need to put in and that I'm looking for whenever I read a proposal. A rationale that explains what your book is, and why everybody should want to read it. A table of contents with, as Vishal was saying, abstracts for each chapter. I think really that's important just so that people have a good sense of what the project is going to be in some depth. Talk about the related titles. I don't think competition is always the right word here, but certainly it's useful for us to understand how you see your proposed book relating to the books that are out there in the market already. And lastly, the readership. Who is this book for? Who do you think it's mainly for? Who else might be interested? And be realistic about this. You know, it's more helpful to us to have a specific answer on the readership than it is for us to be told general readers everywhere will find this book interesting, because that might be true. But general readers everywhere have a lot of options, and we need to be able to kind of hone in on people who have a specific interest in the subject you're talking about. So that's what goes in. What makes a good proposal? These are a few things that I tend to look for. Firstly, a bit like my presentation, it should only be as long as it needs to be. A rough guideline, depending on the kind of book you're proposing, is somewhere between 5 and 10 pages. But basically, you need to make all the points that we need to understand about the book and as little excess fat as possible. And doing that, you need to make clear what the book is and answer the question, so what? I mean, literally imagine the word so what written at the top of the page as you write your proposal, so that as you're writing, you're really focused on, you know, what is an editor or a peer reviewer looking for as they read this proposal? What do they need to understand? And lastly, as I alluded to in the previous slide, show realistic expectations. By all means, be bullish and optimistic about how well your book's going, how successful your book's going to be. But at the same time, understand that, you know, this is a crowded marketplace and you want to be clear, you know, exactly where it fits into the landscape, because that gives us a sense that you're somebody we can work with and who has a kind of a real handle on their subject area. And for us, an author who thinks that they're writing the next Harry Potter is actually not a good thing, because then we have to spend a lot of time kind of managing expectations, which is not good for anybody. Then writing your book itself. These are a few tips that I often give to authors when we talk about the challenge of actually writing a manuscript. The first thing I would say is is to think about it as if you're telling a story. It should have a beginning and a middle and an end. And at all times, you should have a kind of narrative expediency. You should have a sense that everything that you're saying connects with the core arc of your book in the same way as a fiction book would. You shouldn't have long asides for no apparent reason that don't relate to the kind of the core focus of the book, for example. Just as you wouldn't expect a novel to just go off on a sidetrack for no apparent reason on subject on kind of subplots that have no relationship to what's happening in the other chapters. When you're writing, I'm often told it's easiest to start with the easiest chapters first, even if those chapters are the last ones. You're often not going to be writing from scratch in the first place, which actually makes this easier to decide sometimes. But think, which of these chapters am I closest to having ready, or which of them do I think I can kind of get on with? Very often that will not be the introduction, which is usually best written or at least rewritten when everything else is done, so that you know what it is you're introducing with absolute certainty. But it's a good way of getting started on any project, but particularly a book project, to kind of begin with the things that will take the least effort, because the more you've done, the more momentum you build up and the easier it will feel to wrap up. Similarly, to tell a story, always remember your framework. At some point in any proposal, for instance, we're usually expecting to see what theory you're drawing on, what kind of frame of reference you're using. Always make sure that that's very clear throughout every chapter that you write. This goes double if you're editing a book, and it goes triple if you're pulling your own material from perhaps different journal articles together into one book, because we don't want the book to feel like a kind of a collage or a montage of pieces from elsewhere. We want it to feel like a single thing. And the last question, similarly with the proposal, is always ask, does this bit need to be here? Is it useful? Does it contribute to the argument you're making? Or does it provide some flavor that you think the readers are really going to appreciate, which I know particularly in anthropology, for instance, is very important. And if the answer is probably not, then don't put it. This is most obvious when you're doing things like adapting a PhD thesis, where there will often be sections that needed to be there to kind of show you're working for your supervisors in terms of going over in depth the existing literature and theory. And often most of that can be condensed to a very small amount of space in your book, because actually your readers don't need to know that unless it directly pertains to the argument you're making. Okay. The last thing I'm going to talk about is promoting your work, because this is the thing that publishers I often sort of keep a bit quiet about, because there's an assumption that this is what we do. And while that's true, as Barry says, we amplify your voice, so to speak. In order for us to amplify your voice, you have to be saying something, and not just in the book. So as the author, you will be your book's best promoter. Nobody is better placed to tell people why your book's amazing than you are. We can do our best, but we've got however many thousand other books to promote at the same time. And no one person at your publisher, not even your editor, understands your book as well as you do anyway. So use social media. That's the obvious thing. If you're on LinkedIn, make sure you've got announcements on there. Post on Twitter, post on Facebook. Academia.edu is a great resource, and there are others. If you can find people who are interested in reviewing your book, put them in touch with us. Put them in touch with books reviews editors at journals, who are very often crying out for people to review books for them. There's often a supply and demand issue there, where if you're volunteering to review somebody's book, the review editor will often bite off your hand in enthusiasm to let you do it, because it's a bit of a thankless task, except that they get a free book. And lastly, sometimes there are more bespoke sales opportunities. These are less obvious at the moment while we're all doing everything from home, but often when there are in-person events, make sure you tell us or your publisher when you're going to be at a big conference, and we'll try and make sure there's a copy of your book on our display stand if we have one. Or if you're giving a talk, sort of a keynote speech or some other talk where it's mainly you talking at an event, it's often possible to provide books to sell at that event if we think there may be a market for them. And that goes especially here in Southeast Asia, and especially in places like Singapore, the Philippines, Malaysia, where under slightly more normal circumstances, we have the infrastructure often in the big cities, especially to kind of turn up with a table and a handful of books to sell if we think that there's going to be an opportunity to do so. So, always keep in mind, as I say, you are your book's best promoter, and the work does not stop once the book's in your hand. That's when the real work starts. Which I think is really important. Okay, I'm gonna finish there. But thanks everyone for your time, and thanks Nassef and Frankie for having me today at this session. I hope that's been of some help to everybody.
All right. Thank you, Simon, for those important tips to aspiring published authors amongst our attendees. So now we go to our last presenter for this session, Nassef Adyong. Now we get a perspective from someone who works also as both an academic who could potentially publish and as an editor of a book series. Nassef?
Hello, everyone, and good day to everyone who have joined us for this publication forum. And thank you to Barry, to Simon, to Vishal, and also to Roosfa, who have welcomed our invitation for this event. Now, I'm going to share with you with a web page of mine that talks about what kind of scholarship that we are accepting. Where is that? Just a second. So here, as you can see, there are 5 book series that I am handling. The first is on the Islamic Global Studies series under Palgrave, Macmillan, and also under Springer Nature. But the commissioning editors that we're working on are based in in India. And it was developed when we participated at the World Congress for Middle Eastern Studies. That's where we get in touch with Sagarika, colleague of Vishal from Palgrave. And then we also had the second book series on international relations in Southeast Asia, which we are working with Routledge, with Simon and JC, and also with Barry. This series is co-edited by some of my colleagues within the region, Alan Chong from NTU. We also have Ramel from Brunei, and also one that we have just invited from, who is now based in Japan. But most of her works are in IR in Southeast Asia. And the third one is Islam in Southeast Asia series. We kind of tried to develop a niche of what does Muslim scholars or the Muslim inhabitants of the region have produced for over a decade or so. So we try to promote this kind of scholarship on what Muslims have contributed, or what the Southeast Asian scholars have contributed to the literature on Islamic studies, as well as cultures and other aspects of lived experiences of Muslims in the region. And we also have the difference between the Islam and international relations, a publication under Gerlach Press from Germany. Gerlach Press is very highly, I think, specializing on Middle Eastern and Islamic studies. And in this series, we're accepting more on the political lens of how Islam and Muslim states have evolved throughout time, and what are the relations between Muslim states and non-Muslim states, or organizations and non-state actors. More so that we speak of international relations compared to the Islam and Global Studies by Palgrave, which is more on norms, cultures, and others that are not apolitical. And of course, I try to develop also a series with De La Salle Publishing House, the Islam in the Philippines series. Now, there are one manuscript which is on its way by Jeff Milligan on the educational policy in southern Philippines, which is a co-published between Palgrave and Macmillan under the Islam in Southeast Asia, and also under the Islam in the Philippines series with De La Salle Publishing House. Also, we're trying to negotiate the book that we publish, an edited volume on international studies in the Philippines, mapping frontiers, new frontiers in theory and practice, which was published recently by Routledge under the International Relations in Southeast Asia. And we're trying to negotiate to have a local edition, which is more affordable for Filipino scholars and students. And hopefully it will be published by the Ateneo de Manila University Press or Ateneo Press. So these are the guidelines that we're trying to look at proposals. Of course, the description, the rationale, the scope, significance to the series, its relations to competing works, and notable contribution to existing scholarship. And also estimated word length for the book, proposed completion date, and other and describe the target readership for what you're trying to propose. And just an optional, if the app proposal could have 1 or 2 sample chapters. I think the purpose of a book series editor is an added layer of review process to especially to have a niche of scholarship within the region, or what kind of scholarship that the book series are promoting. And also this added layer would also means that we will not compromise quality over quantities. So I guess that's it for me, and looking forward to our Q&A.
All right, thank you, Nassef, for your brief presentation. So there are a lot of questions that came in. Maybe we can ask some of our panelists to elaborate their points that they typed in the Q&A chat box. There was one particular interesting question about your insights on which could be more valuable or should have more weight for an early career academic. I suppose, for example, if you're a recent PhD graduate who has a full-length dissertation on hand, should you focus on developing that into a book manuscript or publishing several journal articles out of it? Can I ask for some more elaboration on your answers that you posted? Maybe we can start with Barry.
Sure. Well, it partly depends on what you want to achieve. As I said earlier, we're publishers and we are there for you. So if you want to reach out to an audience on a regular basis, and journal articles are the best way to do that. Shorter, more succinct bits of information, if you like, bits of research, which are slightly more perhaps accessible, but they're also more cutting edge. A manuscript inevitably takes longer, and there's more of a longer narrative, it's a longer story. And if that's what you want to achieve, and some universities do require the scholar to get a book published before you make an advancement in your career, then that's something definitely we would recommend. And the book length doesn't have to be the full manuscript of 230, 400 pages or whatever. It could be a focus. In our case, we call them Routledge focus, and that could be a segment of your work which you get into a book form relatively quickly. It fills the gap between a journal article and a full-length manuscript.
All right, thank you, Barry.
You want to add anything there?
All right. Simon, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah. Hey, so I mean, it depends whether your priority is what you need to do or what you want to do. So I think we've all kind of in the message, we're kind of taken the assumption that you're looking to advance your career, and that's in that case, I think you probably need to be promiscuous. You need to do a bit of both. certainly you will almost certainly need to publish journal articles to get ahead. It's usually a good idea to publish books as well. Sometimes it's compulsory. I would add that they're very different things in terms of writing them. So you kind of know if you want to write a book. If you find that as you're writing journal articles, you feel frustrated by the fact that you've only got 8,000 words, whatever it is, you don't have the freedom to tell that bigger story. You don't have the freedom to kind of expand into a larger argument. And while having the profile of the journal is obviously a big plus, particularly when you're young and up and coming, you also don't have the freedom to take your thing and promote it on its own as your book, which doesn't necessarily have a bigger impact in the journal article, but it can, because it's just a bigger thing in its own right, which can draw more attention. It has a sort of a larger center of gravity. So everything that everyone's saying is absolutely correct in terms of kind of career and what's important in terms of academia. I think it's also worth considering why you're in academia in the first place and what it is you want to achieve. And I think you kind of know the answer yourself, what you want to write in that sense, and should be guided by that as much as anything, because otherwise, what's the point?
All right. Thank you, Simon. Professor Hashim, would you like to add some into this discussion?
I think I've already answered and written there. But I think the answer is just like others. What is your main goal, actually? For some lecturers from universities in Malaysia, they need to publish more papers to achieve their KPI. The more papers they publish, the more possibility for them to go up in the ranking, and also the papers in general also contribute to the university ranking. And in Malaysia, university ranking is something very important. But at the same time, not all lecturers and academicians focus on that. Some of them, their satisfaction is more if their ideas, their knowledge can be shared, sharing the knowledge with the public, for them to disseminate their knowledge to more people. So as I said, it depends on individual. What do you want actually? Thank you.
All right. Nasef, would you like to respond to that, given that you're both an academic in a university setting?
It depends on the university culture or policies of where you are based at, whether in the global south or global north. In global north, they provide more weight of academic recognition to someone who had published in high impact factored journal articles. So they provide more weight not only in terms of promotion, but also in recognition in the scholarly community if someone had published in these reputable best journals in their own field. But in Asia, for example, in the Philippines, somehow if we're going to take a look at what number of points of promotion that an academic would need, sometimes a book, if you publish a book, whether the publisher is from the global north or global south, it is accounted, it has 10 points in the promotion compared to a journal article, which is only 1 point. So it depends on the culture of the university, the policies in promotion, and also in the academic recognition. And sometimes there are even hierarchies of scholarly recognition. Edited volume is not that so much recognized. It's more, highly recognized are traditional single authored monograph or collaborated monograph compared to edited volume. But the journal articles are the cream of the crop for global north in the scholarly community in the global north.
All right, thank you. Maybe I would like to ask my own personal question to Barry and Simon in particular. What are your thoughts about rising calls, at least in some universities, for open access to knowledge resource? I mean, in particular, the paywalls are sometimes being criticized as hindrance to globalizing and disseminating knowledge, particularly from the global north to the global south. What are your thoughts? Do you think there is a future where we see open access books from the global north, or is it still really much governed by a particular business model?
Perhaps I'll start. I mean, open access is picked up pace after COVID-19 hit for various reasons. The idea of being at home and being frustrated by paywalls, not being able to access material is a major issue. But of course, it's not just paywalls, it's internet infrastructure. There's all kinds of issues around that. And one thing I want to say is, yes, there are paywalls, and we are certainly one of the many publishers that have paywalls. There are reasons, and good reasons for that.
Mm.
Those reasons need to be explained clearly, but also it's clear that the paywall of open access is also something to be a bit concerned about. The paywall on subscription is one, but at least there's no charge for getting published. It's based purely on the quality, peer review, and if it's published, great, it gets into a journal. Yes, maybe then you have to pay for the quality and access. The other paywall is in open access publishing charges, processing charges, article processing charges, which now all publishers have. And there's many, many discounts and even free services for academics in the global south, actually. So if you really look, there are opportunities to get funding for open access. But one could argue that that's just another paywall you're moving it to at the time of getting published. And arguably that could make things even worse for the global south, because there's no money to be put into publishing charges, into processing charges. Not yet. But in my job, I'm having discussions with funding bodies around Asia, Thailand, Hong Kong, certainly Singapore, Japan, Korea. To be honest, I haven't talked to the funding bodies in the Philippines, and if anyone on this call works for a funding body or knows people in the funding body, we should have a conversation, because there are interesting models being developed in close cooperation with funders, in close cooperation with institutions, which will get through this problem. I'm very confident it will get through this problem. The F1000 research partnership, the acquisition that I mentioned, is very much part of that solution. Open access books, let me pass on to Simon, if I may, because the idea of publishing a book open access is now beginning to, I wouldn't say take off, but it is there. Simon?
Yes, I mean, in fact, we one of our big coups this year was we did a deal with Kyoto University to publish lots of chapters of their books open access, or specifically, I should say, chapters of books written by their academics. But I agree with Barry. I think in a mixed ecosystem, open access may be quite useful for academics in the global south, but it is a bit of a trap, because if everything became open access, that would actually make the situation worse, because you have to ask yourself, well, would you rather have access to everything produced in the north but not be able to put anything out yourself, or would you rather have to pay for things that come from the north but also be able to put your own research out for everybody else? So the worst case scenario in a way would actually be if everything went open access, because the places that have the least money to pay for it then don't have a voice, which in some ways is much worse than struggling a bit to get hold of the material in the first place, which is, I would argue, a more easily surmounted obstacle. It's much easier to do a deal with a publisher to get their material more cheaply than it is to do a deal to get your article processing fees reduced, because the economics of it are very different from a publisher's point of view. At the end of the day, while there are still publishers in the ecosystem, and assuming everybody thinks we're doing something useful, someone somewhere is going to be paying for it. So it's really just a question of how we kind of best work around those that challenge, where there's these kind of asymmetries in who's got what funding available.
All right, Professor Hashim, would you like to respond or elaborate on what Simon and Barry said. Coming from a university press in the Global South, what are your thoughts about paywalls and open access? Professor Hashim, did you hear my question? There.
Yes, all of our journals we publish now in open access. The idea is to ensure that all findings that by the writers could be accessed by everybody, because we would like to all of our knowledge to be shared by everybody. That is the purpose of open access. Other than that, I think I agree with all of them. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Nasef, would you like to add something?
I think there should be a reconciliation. How can we reconcile the sustainability of the publishers with also getting ahead of this open access movement in the Global South? But I think that it's not only the publisher's responsibility, but it's also the responsibility of the state itself, the Ministry on Education, on higher education, to also support these kind of movements forwarding open access. So the state itself should provide funding for this. They can collaborate, they can engage with publishers who can, take a look at the quality of the publications and made it available, as long as it is funded by the state or any, I would say, foundations, such as what Barry said, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, or any scholarly foundations, whether here and abroad. That's all. Thanks.
All right. So there's an interesting question that popped up in the Q&A, particularly about predatory research journals. So I would like to maybe pick Barry and Simon's brain on this, and maybe also, of course, Nasif and Professor Hashim. What do you think are the red flags that early career academics should watch out for in order to guard themselves against predatory publishers?
Right. Well, I'm very happy to talk about journal publishing. I do a bit of both books and journals in my career. It is a major problem. Predatory publishing has sucked in a lot of research money, and it's just disappeared into the coffers of very unscrupulous business people that just set themselves up as publishers, setting up websites which look very authentic, sometimes using institutional names or even publisher names to make it look like it's legitimate. So you have to be very careful. The publishing community, Springer Nature, Wiley, Elsevier, Taylor and Francis, many other publishers, we have come together and we do talk about this issue. We have a committee, an association on publishing ethics, which a couple of years ago put out a new program called Think, Check, Submit. So really think about what you're about to do when you contact a potential publisher. Check thoroughly that that publisher is legitimate, and then only submit if you're absolutely certain that that publisher is going to do everything it promises to do. Obviously, the big publishers are well known. It should be quite straightforward to work out whether you're talking to a genuine big publisher. If you're talking to a name that is unfamiliar, the first thing I would advise is talk to your peers, talk to your social media group, hear what they say. There's probably awareness of some of these companies, and sometimes you may be, having been caught out, embarrassed that you just sent them $1,000 and then your article disappears on some website, obscure website. But do talk to your peers about in that process. As I say, they're very sophisticated, the predatory publishers. And to be fair, there is a gray area where it's not always clear. And so one of our jobs in Southeast Asia is to look for those publishers and partners that are clearly trying to establish themselves but are legitimate. And we're very happy to have in-depth discussions and then give them a sort of stamp of approval, if you like, and actually even work with such organizations.
All right. Simon?
I don't really have anything to add to that, actually. I think Barry covered it pretty well.
All right. Nasef, have you encountered any experience with predatory publications and predatory publishers?
Of course, we do encounter predatory publishers, for example, Lambert, who will always send emails inviting scholars and students to publish in their publishing company. I think that it has also something to do with the positionality of scholars, or especially with the young scholars that are not aware of which are the reputable publishers in their own field. And the generational context. For example, in the Philippines, there is a generational context and research culture of scholarship within the metropolis and other regional provinces in the Philippines, that there is a gap between production of knowledge and also which publishers that they had to select and choose to submit their research articles. So I guess that's it. Thanks.
All right. So maybe to wrap up this discussion, I'd like to ask something about the future with regard to print and electronic publishing. What are your thoughts on the future of publishing? Do you think we are moving towards more of electronic publishing, or will there always be a place for print publishing?
I'm looking around. I don't mind going behind me. I've got a whole load of books, and then punter me here, I've got a whole load of books. Some of them I've purchased, some of them working for Routledge. We get occasional free copies. I believe strongly there will always be a place for print. Print technology is very advanced. It is not that expensive. Distribution is a problem at the moment, but the feel, the tactile side of reading a book at leisure can never be replaced. And I'm not just speaking because I'm at the wrong end of my 6th decade. My children, thankfully, who are in their 20s, love books too. And I think a lot of youngsters love books. But obviously, and COVID-19 has picked up this pace, the importance of making content available electronically, discoverable, properly tagged, is so important now. So we're talking about a blend of solutions. And in fact, without going into details, we're now talking to university libraries that over many years have acquired vast collections of print, who have a small collection perhaps of electronic, more recent titles. We're now talking to them and saying, well, your collection, maybe not all of it, but some of it, why don't you convert to electronic? We have the ebooks. We will give you a very good discount. We can't do it for free, but we will give you a very good discount on converting your holdings to electronic. We hope libraries don't then throw out the print. Probably some will. Maybe there's a good chance for, if you're interested in secondhand books, a good market for secondhand books. But I believe in a blended solution to this. The other point I'd make, if I may, ebooks, as we often use them and often interact with them, they need to evolve into something much more interactive, much more useful, especially for the digital native generation that's coming up, who uses much more succinct, smaller parcels of information, much more audio-visual, linked to YouTube, for example. That must be built into the electronic books of the future.
All right, thank you. Professor Hashim, would you like to share your thoughts on that?
I think I agree with Barry, but I think if you look at what going on during COVID, most of the printers having facing problem because of the situation now, and the electronic books publishing took place. Publishing in digital and electronic format become much easier, much cheaper and faster. So, and new generation also, the reading behavior totally different with what we, like myself and Barry, with the gray hair now. But our children, most of our children, they are exposed to the electronic material from the beginning, from the early stage. So I think, yes, at the moment, there are still area and space for print book, but I think slowly, we all of us will move towards electronic book because of the cost, especially, and time consumed. Because everybody can publish electronically very fast and ready and accessible at any time, any place. I think time will come that we will change from printed book into e-books. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Simon, would you like to add or?
Yeah, just quickly. I mean, as slightly younger than the other panelists still going here, I think it's just going to be a question the ecosystem shifts. So at the moment, for us in a normal year, for books specifically, journals are a bit different, but for books, something like 10 or 20% of our sales will be ebooks. Barry will tell me if that's way off, but it's in that ballpark. This year, the balance has shifted significantly for very obvious reasons. My instinct is it will shift back again another couple of years, just as people get back in the cinemas when they feel safe to do so. I mean, it's only semi-permanent, but it won't shift back to where it was. It will kind of, the balance will shift again, and we don't know where that will end up. But the flip side of this is that it's actually very easy now to make a book available to print in location. I don't know, particularly if we talk something like a research monograph, which is quite an expensive book to begin with, the marginal cost of printing one book to order in, say, Singapore, compared to printing hundreds of books and sending some of them to Singapore, which is what we would have done 5 or 10 years ago, is so much lower that there's no reason that particularly larger publishers would stop offering print as an option, because as long as people want it, we don't have to print very many books and keep them in warehouses. We just have the files and they're print books as soon as we run one off on a printer. So the change in technology there is also very important. So as far as we're concerned, we'll keep offering them as long as people still want to buy them. And our instinct, and my instinct looking at how my young boys handle books, is that the balance will shift. There will be certainly a lot more ebooks and a lot fewer print books in 10 years than there are now. But I don't think the print book's going anywhere.
All right.
Thank you for interrupting. I must leave. I've got an important meeting. So thank you very much. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Nassif.
Yes.
Barry.
Yeah, we're also about to end this session. So thank you to Barry, Simon, Roosfa, and Nassif for sharing their insights in this session. Maybe we can have a 2-minute break before we proceed with the session with journal editor